last period, and so that is not a good lesson to upload. Okay, here we go. Two methods you're going to learn today. Really three things, but two methods. Gauss-Jordan and Cramer's rule. Those are the two methods that we're going to learn, okay? All right, so I just briefly discussed this with you last time, okay? Gaussian, listen right here. Okay, everybody freeze and look right here, please. Gaussian 0, 0, 0. That's all you have to get. Row echelon, you have to get those zeros, but you also have to get those ones, okay? Today is Gauss-Jordan. Gauss-Jordan, you have to get all that plus 3 more zeros, okay? You have to turn it into the identity matrix. That's what that's called, the identity matrix. So the formula for Gauss-Jordan that you are going to have to memorize is you put A on the left, then you do a solid line and put B on the right. You change it into the identity matrix, and then you have a solid line, and on the right is your answer. The value of X is your actual answer. So you're just going to go straight from a matrix to the answer. There's not going to be any algebra in between, okay? If you have a 2 by 2 matrix, that's your identity. If you have a 3 by 3 matrix, that's your identity. Now, I'm going to give you an order in which you should turn those things into what they're supposed to be. The order can be done out of order. I want you to really try to stay in order, because if you go out of order, you can mess up something that you just got, but sometimes it's okay. Sometimes it makes sense to go out of order, okay? So if you have a 2 by 2, the order is 1, 2, 3, 4, like that, okay? If you have a 3 by 3, here's your order, and both of these orders you're going to have to remember, okay? You're going to have to memorize. So you start at the left and go down. 1, 2, 3. The center is a 4. Underneath that is a 5. Everyone in the room should be writing. A couple people not writing. Then you go to the right, and then you go up around. So 6, 7, 8, 9. That's your order. Okay? Okay, we're just going to jump into it. Okay? Solve this using Gauss-Jordan. Okay? We're just going to jump into a 3 by 3. Okay, so you do your matrix. Across the top, 1, 1, 1, solid line 1. Underneath that, 2, 2, 0, 6. Underneath that, 3, 4, negative 1, and 13. Okay? Now watch. Please, 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 please don't go ahead of me. The first thing you need is a 1 right there. Done. I want everybody to freeze for just a second. This will come up at some point, so I want you to try to remember. If that's not a 1, say, don't change yours, but say it was a 4. If I turned my 4 into a 1, I would have to go row 1 divided by 4 becomes my new row 1, and that's a mess, because then I just made a ton of fractions, okay? So if turning something into a 1 creates fractions, don't do it. Skip it. So even though it's step 1 or it's step 4 or it's step 6 to make that a 1, if it makes a train wreck, don't do it. You can do it at the end and we can deal with it, okay? I'd way rather deal with a 1 at the end than deal with a fraction, okay? So anyway, this is done. So now I need to get a 0 right there. Use the 1. So I'm going to go negative 2 times row 1. Added to row 2 becomes my new row 2. So row 1 doesn't change. Row 3 doesn't change. Take a negative 2 and distribute it across the top. And you have negative 2, negative 2, negative 2, negative 2. Write row 2 underneath it, 2, 2, 0, 6. Add those together and you get 0, 0, negative 2, positive 4. And everybody freeze right there. If I make a mistake, correct me immediately, okay? Because we don't want wrong numbers on our notes. Freeze right there. I'm going to go out of order. Because in the middle row, row 2, I have 0, 0. Well, that's what I need at the bottom. And that's an easy thing to just switch those rows, okay? So I need you to write a formula to me. And I want you to say row 2 becomes row 3, and row 3 becomes row 2. That's how you write switch the rows, okay? So the top row is 1, 1, 1, solid line 1. Switch row 2 and row 3, and you get 3, 4, negative 1, 13, underneath 0, 0, negative 2, positive 4. So guys, I just went out of order, okay? If you go out of order, then the second you carry on, you need to go back to the original order and start doing it the way you're supposed to, okay? So what I'm supposed to have is a 0 right there. Okay, so I'm going to go negative 3 times row 1, added to row 2, becomes my new row 2. So row 1 doesn't change. Row 3 doesn't change. Distribute a negative 3 and you get negative 3, negative 3, negative 3, negative 3. Write row 2 underneath it. Add them together and you get 0, 1, negative 4, and 10. Now look what happened. I was trying to turn the 3 into a 0, which I did, but I totally got a bonus because then the center turned into what it was supposed to be. So that was awesome. Okay, so look, 1, 0, 0, 1, 0. So I've got everything. Now I'm all the way to that number right there. To turn something into a 1, you divide it by what's there, but stop and see if that's going to make a fraction. If it makes a fraction, postpone it until the very end. You can push your fractions off, okay? That's not going to make a fraction, so I'm totally good. So I'm going to go row 3, divided by negative 2, becomes my new row 3. So row 1 doesn't change. Row 2 doesn't change. 0 divided by negative 2 is a 0, so those stay zeros. Negative 2 divided by negative 2 is a 1. 4 divided by negative 2 is a negative 2. So the next step is to make that guy a 0. Okay, everybody freeze right here. If I used row 1, I would have to multiply row 1 by a 4 and then add it to row 2. And this would be a 4 and it would mess that up. And that would be a 4 and it would mess that up. So in that step right there, which is step 7, I cannot use row 1. Go back to the beginning of your notes. Go to the order that I told you to do. And I want you to circle 7. And I want you to circle 5. And I want you to remind yourself, don't use row 1. They will mess up what you had before. Okay? Okay, so let's carry on. Sorry. Okay, so it's fine because I can do this easily by just turning that guy into a 4. So I'm going to go 4 times row 3 plus row 2 becomes my new row 2. So row 1 doesn't change. Row 3 doesn't change. If you're distributing a number into a row, I expect to see your numbers. If you mess up and you didn't give me numbers, you're not going to get partial credit. Okay? Write row 2 underneath it, then add those together, and I get 0, 1, 0, 2. The next thing I need is a 0 right here. Okay, I need you to really listen right here for a second. Okay, watch. I could do row 1 minus row 3 becomes my new row 3. I could also do row 3 minus row 1 becomes my new row 3. Listen, they both work, They both give me a 0 in that spot. One of them is better than the other. One of them is better than the other. Imagine what would happen if you did row 1 minus row 3 and you stuck those numbers at the top versus row 3 minus row 1. Can anybody tell me which one's better and why it's better? Can anybody see it? Go ahead.
Row 1 minus row 3.
Is better. Why?
Because if you do row 3 minus row 1, it changes the ones to negatives.
Yes. If I did 0 minus 1, that's a negative 1. Now that's not a deal breaker. You can still get it right, because then all you'd have to do is go through and just change the signs of all the numbers in the row. But why make more work for yourself if you don't have to? Okay? Okay, so let's go like this. This is actually going to become my new row 1. I probably confused you with that. Sorry. Becomes my new row 1. So row 2 doesn't change. Row 3 doesn't change. If it's just one row added or subtracted to another row, you don't have to write the numbers down. So 1 minus 0, 1. 1 minus 0, 1. 1 minus 1, 0. 1 minus a negative 2, that's 1 plus 2, which is a 3. The last thing I need is a 0 there. I can use row 1 and row 2. Which one's better? Row 1 minus row 2 or row 2 minus row 1? Tell me. 1 minus 2, right? So go row 1 minus row 2 becomes my new row 1. If you do it the other way, you're just going to end up with a negative 1, and then you have to change the signs. You can recover from that. So row 2 doesn't change. Row 3 doesn't change. Let's go row 1 minus row 2. 1 minus 0, 1. 1 minus 1, 0. 0 minus 0, 0. 3 minus 2, 1. Guess what? We're done. See this side over here? Remember, that's your X, which is your answer. And you just write it as an ordered triple, like that, and you're done. Who says gotcha? Let's see up high. Give me some feedback how you're feeling. Okay, good. Let's keep going. Example 2. Okay, across the top, 1, 1, negative 1, solid line 0. Underneath, 2, 1, negative 1, 1. Underneath, 3, 1, 2, 2. Everybody freeze for just a second, okay? I don't want anybody to write right now, okay? I'm going to show you a very common mistake that people make. I don't want you to make that mistake. So I want you to listen, okay? Just listen, don't write a single thing, just watch, okay? First thing I need is a 1 here. Got it. Second thing I need is a 0 here. So I'm going to go negative 2 times row 1 added to row 2 becomes my new row 2. Absolutely, that is what I would do. What about this? 2 times row 1. Subtract row 2 becomes my new row 2. Does that work? Yes or no? Come on, you guys. It works, right? Freeze. Look, I do not want you to do that. I don't want you to make that a minus. The only time I've ever made it a minus is when I go one row, subtract another row. That's the only time, okay? Watch what people do. Please don't write for a second. I just want you to watch. Look what they do. They'll take the 2 and distribute it across the top row. Then they'll write down row 2 the way it is. And they're supposed to be subtracting these, right? So they write row 1 down the way it is, doesn't change. Write row 3 down the way it is, doesn't change. Look what happens. 2 minus 2, 0. then instead of remembering to keep subtracting, which also changes signs, they start adding and get 3, -3, and 1. Okay? So my advice to you is this. Always set these numbers up so that when you get to that point, you just add the numbers together. You just add them instead of that subtract. Who says I understand? Raise your hand. I'm telling you, when people hand me their paper and they say, Waller, what did I do wrong? If I look and they have a negative right there, that's usually the problem. They forgot to keep switching all those signs. It's just too much to remember. Okay? Okay, now let's do it a good way. Distribute the -2. So you have -2, -2, 2, and 0. Right row 2 underneath it. 2, 1, -1, 1. Add those together. Do you see how much it's easier to just add them, just combine them, no switching signs? You get 0, -1, 1, and 1. The next thing I need is a 0 here. Use the 1. I'm going to multiply it by -3. So I'm going to go -3 times row 1, added to row 3, becomes my new row 3. So row 1 doesn't change. Row 2 doesn't change. Take a -3 across the top. I want to see these numbers. -3, -3, 3, 0. Underneath, 3, 1, 2, 2. Add them together. 0, -2, 5, and 2. The next thing I need is a 1 right there. That's not tough. You just take row 2 and divide it by -1. I'm just telling you, I would never write it like that. Row 2 divided by -1 becomes my new row 2. Because dividing by a -1 is the same thing as what, everybody? Multiplying by -1. And multiplying by -1 is the same thing as just changing all the signs. So I would just personally always write that as a multiply, but it doesn't matter. So row 1 doesn't change. Row 3 doesn't change. Change the signs of the middle, and you get 0, 1, -1, 1. The next thing I need is a 0 here. Don't use row, tell me, 1, because this 1 will mess up that 0. Okay, yes, honey?
When you change the signs, do you change them past the line as well?
Everything. It's all one row. Okay, good. Hey, I want to say something really fast right now. The timing of her question, oh, I didn't change my sign. Okay, now I'm good, right? Okay, I messed up, and she fixed us. Her timing of her question was great. Last period, I was in the middle of this big, huge explanation, and a hand goes up. If I stop and answer your question and come back, the whole class is confused because we took too much of a break and now they've lost their train of thought. So if you ask me a question and I tell you just a minute, I want you to know that I will come back to you, but I can't answer it right then because your classmates are going to get confused. Okay? All right. So now I need to get a 0 right here. Don't use row 1. So I'm going to go 2 times row 2 plus row 3 becomes my new row 3. You always use the 1. Okay? So row 1 doesn't change. Row 2 doesn't change. Multiply row 2 by a 2 and you get 0, 2, -2, -2. Write down row 3 underneath it. Add those together and you get 0, 0, 3, 0. The next step in that order I gave you is to get a 1 right there. The way you get a 1 is you divide by 3. If I divide by 3, am I creating fractions? No. So I'm going to go ahead and do it right now. So I'm going to go row 3 divided by 3 becomes my new row 3. So row 1 doesn't change. Row 2 doesn't change. 0 divided by 3 is a 0. So those all stay zeros. And 3 divided by 3 is a 1. Okay? You guys, right now, I know that Z is 0. I've got my third value because I got that whole row to what it was supposed to. Now I just got to do that one and that one, okay? My next step is to get a 0 right there, okay? Don't use row 1 because that one and that one will mess up that 0 and that 0. So I'm going to go row 2 added to row 3 becomes my new row 3. Okay, so sorry, I'm kind of, is this example 2? Yeah. Let me just express that a little better. If I use row 1 right now, if I like subtracted those rows, then that 0 right there, I think I said it wrong. That 0 and that 1 get messed up by the 1 and the 1 that were there, so I cannot use row 1. Who says I understand? Raise your hand, let me see. Okay, so let's add those together. That should be my new row 2. Thank you. My new row 2. Okay, so row 1 doesn't change. Row 3 doesn't change. Add row 2 and row 3 together, and I get 0, 1, 0, -1. The next thing I need right here is a 0. I'm going to use row 1 and row 3. So I'm going to take row 1, I'm going to add it to row 3, and that becomes my new row 1. So row 2 doesn't change. Row 3 doesn't change. Add row 1 and row 3 together, and you get 1, 1, 0, 0. I only have one thing left to do, and that's to get a 0 right there. Which one is better? Row 1 minus row 2 or row 2 minus row 1? You tell me. Row 1 minus row 2. Yep. So I'm going to go row 1 minus row 2 becomes my new row 1. So row 2 doesn't change. Row 3 doesn't change. The only time I ever put a negative is this scenario where I'm just subtracting rows. So 1 minus 0, 1. 1 minus 1, 0. 0 minus 0, 0. 0 minus a -1. That's 0 plus 1, which is a 1. And I'm done. My answer is 1, -1, 0. Done. Who says I'm good? Let me see how you're feeling. Do a big raise up if you're feeling good. Okay, good. Now, here's some good news. Take your pencil, and I want you to put tons and tons and tons and tons of stars around this thing. That is what I think it's going to look like on your final, right there. Okay, so listen what happens. Read the directions. Use matrices, row operations / Gauss elimination to solve the following system of linear equations. No points will be given if the system is solved by other methods. Like 2 years ago, 4 semesters ago, I got my final and this is what it looked like. I got our final. And I was like, well, what's that? Don't know what that is. Because I know Gaussian, that's what we learned last time. I know Gauss-Jordan, that's what we're learning today. What is that? So I called them or emailed them and I was like in a panic. And this is what they said, okay? Write this down. Please, you can use Gaussian or Gauss-Jordan. Gauss-Jordan is what we're learning today, which is where you have to go all the way to the identity. Gaussian is just the 3 zeros. Why in the world would you ever go all the way to the identity if you can just get those 3 zeros, which is so much easier, right? Last time's lesson. So 99% chance that this is going to be on your final. And you could choose either method. I would always do Gaussian, okay? So this is basically a review problem from last time, okay? So it's going to be 3, -1, -4. Solid line, -9. 2, -3, 1, 11. 4, -1, 2, and 17. Now I want you to watch this closely. This happened on your homework, and it's happened on the final before, so watch. I need to make that a 0. But I don't have a what, everybody? I don't have a 1. I'm going to be nice. I'm just telling you, on quiz 4, I'm going to be nice. Okay? It's going to be pretty straightforward. The final, maybe not. So look right here. Everybody just freeze and look right here. If I was using those two equations, and I was trying to eliminate the x's, I would multiply this guy by a 2 and this guy by a 3. Then they would both be 6's. But I would need one of them to be a negative, it doesn't matter which, and then my x's would eliminate. Who says I understand that? Okay, that's exactly what we're going to do over here. So I'm going to go -2 times row 3 plus 3 times row 2 becomes my new row 2. Yes, I'm so sorry. A little distracted. -2 times row 1, thank you, plus 3 times row 2 becomes my new row 2. Okay, so row 1 doesn't change. Row 3 doesn't change. Write these numbers down, please. Distribute a -2 across the top, and you get -6, 2, 8, and 18. Distribute a 3 across the center, and you get 6, -9, 3, and 33. Add those together, and you get 0, -7, 11, and 51. Now I need a 0 here. I still don't have a 1. So I have to turn the 3 and the 4 both into, tell me everybody. Everybody freeze. What would I turn them both into? 12s. Good. So I'm going to go -4 times row 1 plus 3 times row 3 becomes my new row 3. Row 1 doesn't change. Row 2 doesn't change. Multiply a -4 across the top. -12, 4, 16, and 36. Distribute a 3 across the bottom. 12, -3, 6, and 51. Add those together, and I get 0, 1, 22, and 87. My numbers are getting big. Who cares? That's not stressful. I got a calculator right here, so that's not scary, okay? The last thing I need is a 0 here. Don't use row 1 because the 3 will mess up my corner 0. But it's going to be easy because I'm just going to go 7 times row 3 plus row 2 becomes my new row 3. So row 1 doesn't change. Row 2 doesn't change. Distribute a 7 across the bottom and you get 0, 7. 22 times 7 is 154. 87 times 7 is 609. I know, like, I would be starting to get a little concerned at this point. I'd be like, these numbers are huge. Am I messing up? You're going to realize in a second that we're doing it perfectly fine. Write down row 2 underneath it. Add these together, and you get 0, 0, 165. 609 plus 51 is 660. Now we're done. I've got my zeros. okay? Because all I have to do is Gaussian. Go right here. That means 0 times x plus 0 times y, 165 times z equals 660. If you go 660 divided by 165, you get a 4. The second you get a number that's not a fraction, then your confidence should go through the roof, because it's not very common to make an error and get a number that's not a fraction, okay? So I'm feeling pretty good. I'm feeling like, you know, I'm in good shape. So I'm going to put that 4 there. Then you just work your way up. So go to the row up above it. So that means negative 7y plus 11z equals 51. But z is 4. So that's negative 7y plus 44 equals 51. Move your 44 over. Negative 7y equals 7. Divide by negative 7, y equals negative 1. Then you just go up to the top. And the top is 3x minus y minus 4z equals negative 9. That's 3x. Y is a negative 1. So minus a negative 1 is a plus 1. Z is a 4. Negative 4 times 4 is negative 16 equals negative 9. That gives me 3x minus 15 equals negative 9. That gives me 3x equals 6. Divide. That gives me x equals 2. And I'm done. I don't know if it will be that tough on the final with, you know, the 2 and the 3 and the, you know, 3 and 4, but I think now you can probably deal with it. But I do think that that's what it's going to look like. That will be the wording of your problem, okay? Who says, I'm good? I feel like I'm good with this stuff. Raise your hand. Good. It's frustrating. It's frustrating because you'll do it and you get the wrong answer and you start fixing it and you can't find it, and then you just need to walk away for a minute. By the way, you picked up a calendar over there, but I didn't really mention it, okay? The calendar in the front of your workbook is no longer valid. So, you know, you can do it now or you can do it later, but I would just put a big, huge X in my calendar on April and May, and I would stick that guy in there. And I'm very sorry, but yes, I did add the extra lesson over prom weekend. But you can do your assignment on Thursday night. Don't do anything on Friday or Saturday. And then if you do homework on Sunday, you can watch the next video and do the homework in 2 hours on Sunday, and that's what you have to do, okay? It was the best scenario that I could come up with, okay? Because I don't want you to learn important lessons through video, okay? Okay, here we go with the next method, okay? We're going to find a determinant. I do think that this will be on your final as well. So this is really a big lesson today, okay? I think the one on your final is either going to look like one of these guys right here or this guy, okay? That is my guess. I get as nervous as you guys waiting for that thing to come across and see what actually is on it. Okay, so we have to learn how to do a determinant. Okay, can someone tell me what time the bell rings? 18? Okay, 30 minutes. Okay, to find the determinant of A, the symbolism is det of A, or it looks like an absolute value of A. Those both mean determinant, which I'm about to teach you. Okay, so if you have matrix A, then the determinant looks just like the matrix, but it just doesn't have those little things, you know, looks more like absolute value. And here's what you do. It's really simple. The first thing you do is multiply this way. So you go A times D is AD. Then you put a minus, and then you cross multiply the other way, which is B times C. That's all you do. Okay, so let's come down here to question A and find the determinant. So the first way you always multiply is top left to bottom right. So you go 3 times 1 is 3. You guys, the second you write down that 3, I want you to put a minus after it. That is probably the #1 reason people miss it. Why did you put a minus? Because the formula is minus. Then multiply the other way. 6 times -2 is a -12. minus a negative 12 is a plus 12. 3 plus 12 is 15, and that's your answer. We would only be so lucky that that easy of a problem would be on your final, right? I think it's going to be the bigger one down below. Let's do question B. First thing you do is 3 times negative 4, that's negative 12. Then you put a minus. 5 times negative 2 is negative 10. Minus a negative 10 is a plus 10. A negative 12 and a positive 10 is a negative 2, and that's your answer. Okay? All right. So what's going to happen is it's probably going to be a 3 by 3 instead of a 2 by 2, which is going to be bigger. Okay? This plus and this plus right there, what those mean are don't change and don't change. So the top number and the bottom number, you don't change the sign. The middle one, you change the sign. Okay? Now I'm going to go really slowly because this is really strange, but it works out. Okay? This that I'm doing right now is just a setup. I'm showing you how to set it up. Okay? Okay, I'm going to highlight my determinant and I'm going to cross through things. I don't want you to cross or highlight anything on yours because it's going to confuse you. So just look up at mine. Okay? So the first thing you do is you start with a 1. So you write down the 1. Okay? And then right beside that, you set yourself up to write a determinant. Okay? The crossing that I do right now, I don't want you to write on your paper. Look what I do. I get rid of the row, and I get rid of the column that the 1 is in. What I'm left with goes here. 5, 6, 8, 9. Okay? Then I do it again. The next number is a 4. That's the guy that I changed the sign of. So I go minus 4. Then I put the determinant behind it. Now look what I do. I get rid of the row and I get rid of the column, and what I'm left with is 2, 3, 8, 9. Then I do the last one, which is a 7. I don't change the sign, so I go plus 7. I get rid of the row, I get rid of the column, and what I'm left with is 2, 3, 5, 6. Now that's not your answer. That's just how you set it up. Okay? Who says I followed you? Give me some feedback how we're doing. Okay. Now we're actually going to find one. Okay? Now I'm going to go really slowly. Okay? Again, I'm going to mark through all over my determinant. Don't do it because then you're going to be crossing and erasing and crossing and it's a train wreck. Okay? Okay, so start with the 1. Write it down. If you want to look at the crossing so you can visualize it, get rid of the row, get rid of the column. What you're left with is 0, 1, 2, 1. Okay, I'm crossing, so if you need to see it, look up, but I won't keep it there forever. Okay, then you change to the next number, which is a negative 1. Change the sign, so go plus 1. Now, you get rid of that row, and you get rid of that column, and what you're left with is 2, negative 3, 2, 1. Now I go to the final number, which is a negative 2. I don't change the sign of that one. The only one I change the sign of is the middle one. Get rid of the row, get rid of the column. What I'm left with is 2, negative 3, 0, 1. Okay? Now, here's what I need you to understand. This is a term, meaning it's going to simplify to a number. Then I'm going to add it to this term, and then I'm going to subtract it from this term. What people start doing is they start like commingling those. They think they're supposed to be multiplying them or something. It's just a number and a number and a number, and each of those numbers has a sign. Okay, now we have to do the cross multiply thing. So see this 1, I'm going to write it down. And then remember the cross multiply thing, how you evaluate a determinant. First you go that way. So 0 times 1 is 0. Then do your minus. 2 times 1 is a 2. then go plus 1. Do the cross multiply thing. 2 times 1 is 2, minus 2 times negative 3 is a negative 6, minus a negative 6 is a plus 6. Do the next one. Negative 2, parenthesis. First way you multiply is that way. 2 times 1 is 2, minus 0 times negative 3 is a 0. Yeah, let's just keep showing some work. So this is going to be 1. 0 minus 2 is a negative 1. That's a term. Plus 1 times 8 minus 2 times 2. So term, term, term. So that's a negative 2 plus 8 minus 4. That gives you a positive 2, and you're done. Okay? Now, if you don't write this line, and you don't write that line, and you just put that guy in your calculator and get a 2, that's fine. Okay? I just wanted to show you how it would be simplified. Who says I understand that? Raise your hand. I bet you have, not exaggerating, 85% chance that's going to be on your final. That exact, not that exact problem, but that exact idea. Okay? So make sure you know that one, okay? Okay, Cramer's rule. Cramer's rule is the second method that I'm teaching you today, okay? Now, you guys, I've gone through the finals for so many times for so long. I have a pretty good idea of what's going to be on there and what's not, okay? I don't write it. I don't see it until like a couple of days before you do. I have never, ever seen a problem that says solve this system by Cramer's rule. I've never seen it, okay? I don't think you're going to see it. I'm going to put it on the quiz because they could give it to us and I want you to be ready, but I think the chance is really low, okay? The chance of that guy right there, really high. I've seen that almost every time I see that on finals, okay? Okay, so let's go through Cramer's rule. So, here's your system right there, okay? Do you see how in front of the x is an a? You're going to put that right there. This is to determine the value of d. In front of the y, on the top is a b. Second equation in front of the x is a c. In front of the y is a d. So that's your value of d, or that's how you set up to find the value of d. Now watch this. To find d sub x, do you see how the c and the a are the coefficients of x? If you're finding d sub x, those numbers are going to change. The b and the d are going to stay a b and a d because those are the y's. So the x's change to the right-hand side, which are e and f. So there's your setup. To find d sub y, the x's stay the same, ac. The y's change to ef. Then you do your cross multiply thing for each of them. Find your values, okay? And then to find x, you take this d sub x, whatever you get, and divide it by d. There's your answer. To find y, you take this d sub y and divide it by d, and there's your answer, okay? First one's going to be easy, nice and easy and simple, and then the next one's way longer because it's a 3 by 3, okay? So everybody go d equals. When you find d, the numbers don't change. So across the top would be 3, 2, underneath negative 1, 5. When you evaluate it, you do that cross multiply thing. Make sure you multiply the 3 and the 5 together first. So 3 times 15, or 3 times 5 is 15, minus 2 times negative 1 is a negative 2, minus a negative 2 is a plus 2, so I know the value of d is 17. Now I'm going to do d sub x. To find d sub x, you change the x's. So the y's stay 2 and 5. The x's change to the right-hand side, which are 7 and 9. Then you cross multiply. 7 times 5 is 35, minus 9 times 2 is 18. So now we know that d sub x is also 17. Now we have to find d sub y. So to find d sub y, the x's stay the same, 3 and negative 1. The y's change to 7 and 9. cross multiply, 9 times 3 is 27, minus a negative 1 times 7 is a negative 7, minus a negative 7 is a plus 7, so now I know d sub y is 34. Now to find x, you take d sub x, which is 17, divide it by d, which is 17, and you get x equals 1. To find y, you take d sub y, which is 34, divided by d, which is 17, and you get a 2. So your answer is 1, 2, and you're done. Who says gotcha? Let me see. Okay. Now we're going to do the same thing, but it's going to be a 3 by 3. I have not seen Cramer's rule on a final for so long. If I could say 0, I would say 0, but I don't dare, because what if it comes up, right? So let's be ready. Okay, this is going to take a long time. Write really small, okay? Okay, here's your D. Across the top, 2, negative 1, 2. Underneath, 1, negative 1, 1. Underneath, 1, 1, and 2. Now I'm going to evaluate this, okay? So it's going to be 2. Get rid of the row, get rid of the column, negative 1, 1, 1, 2. Write the second number, which is a 1, but change the sign. Get rid of the row, get rid of the column, negative 1, 2, 1, 2. Write the third number, which is a 1. Get rid of the row, get rid of the column, negative 1, 2, negative 1, 1. Now you do the cross multiply thing. So that's going to give you negative 2 minus, the biggest mistake that people make, they don't put the minus right there, and they'll make it a plus. 1 times 1 is 1. Minus 1, cross multiply, negative 1 times 2 is a negative 2, minus 2 times 1 is 2, plus 1, cross multiply, 1 times negative 1 is a negative 1, minus 2 times negative 1 is a negative 2, minus a negative 2 is a plus 2. Let's just grab our calculators and do this right now. Okay, so you're going to go 2 parenthesis, negative 2 minus 1, close it, minus 1 parenthesis, negative 2 minus 2, close it, plus 1 parenthesis, negative 1 plus 2, close it, and now I know that D is negative 1. Okay, so I'm going to come over here and kind of make a list. So now I know D is a negative 1. I have to do this 4 more times. D sub x, D sub y, 3 more times. D sub z. And then I can find my values. Okay, let's do D sub x. To find D sub x, you change the x's to the right hand side. Okay, so the x's are going to be 3, 2, 3 going down. Y's are negative 1, 1, 1. Z's are 2, 1, 2. Okay, start with the 3. Get rid of the row, get rid of the column, negative 1, 1, 1, 2. Write the second number, which is a 2, change the sign. Get rid of the row, get rid of the column, negative 1, 2, 1, 2. Final numbers are 3. Get rid of the row, get rid of the column, negative 1, 2, negative 1, 1. Now you do the cross multiply thing. Negative 1 times 2 is negative 2, minus 1 times 1 is 1. Minus 2, negative 1 times 2 is a negative 2, minus 2 times 1 is 2, plus 3, negative 1 times 1 is negative 1, minus 2 times negative 1 is a negative 2, minus a negative 2 is a plus 2. Okay, grab your calculator, 3 parenthesis, negative 2 minus 1, close it, minus 2 parenthesis, negative 2 minus 2, close it, plus 3 parenthesis, negative 1 plus 2, close it, and I know that D sub x is 2. So I'm going to come over here to my list, D sub x is a 2. Raise your hand if you're following me. Show me who's with me. Okay. It's not hard. It's just like long and tedious. I want to say one thing before we continue. Does it blow your mind that someone figured this out? Someone figured it out. You can solve this systems by doing all these things. What the heck? Someone figured it out. They need a hobby, right? Let's find d sub y. X's don't change. They are 2, 1, 1. Y's change to 3, 2, 3. Z's 2, 1, 2. Okay? Start with the first number, which is a 2. Get rid of the row. Get rid of the column. 2, 1, 3, 2. Second number's a 1. Change the sign. Get rid of the row. Get rid of the column. 3, 2, 3, 2. Third number's a 1. Don't change the sign. Get rid of the row. Get rid of the column. 3, 2, 2, 1. Now do the cross multiply thing. So I have 2 times 2 is 4, minus 1 times 3 is 3. Minus 1, 3 times 2 is 6, minus 3 times 2 is 6. Plus 1, 3 times 1 is 3, minus 2 times 2 is 4. Grab your calculator, and I know that's 2 times 1, minus 1 times 0, I'm just doing some of it in my head, plus 1 times negative 1. That's going to give me a 1. So I know d sub y is 1. Now I have to find d sub z. X's don't change. Y's don't change. Z's change to 3, 2, 3. Okay? Start with the 2. Get rid of the row. Get rid of the column. Negative 2, negative 1, 2, 1, 3. Second number's a 1. Change the sign. Get rid of the row. Get rid of the column. Negative 1, 3, 1, 3. Third number's a 1. Get rid of the row. Get rid of the column. Negative 1, 3, negative 1, 2. Do the cross multiply thing. So you have your 2. You always multiply this way first, okay? So 3 times negative 1 is negative 3, minus 2 times 1 is 2. Minus 1, 3 times negative 1 is negative 3, minus 3 times 1 is 3. Plus 1, 2 times negative 1 is a negative 2, minus 3 times negative 1, that's a negative 3, minus a negative 3 is a plus 3. So grab your calculator, 2 parentheses, negative 3 minus 2, close it, minus 1 parentheses, negative 3 minus 3, close it, plus 1 parentheses, negative 2 plus 3, close it, and I get a negative 3. Okay? And now I have to find them. So my values are x is d sub x, which is 2, divided by d, which is a negative 1. So I know x is a negative 2. Remember to write this as an ordered triple. To find y, you take d sub y, which is a 1, divided by negative 1, and you get a negative 1. To find z, d sub z is a negative 3, divided by d, which is a negative 1. There's my answer. Is this going to be on the final? What do you think? I don't think so. Very long, takes forever, one little mistake and it's messed up. I don't think you're going to see it. I just don't. I've never seen it. But they tell me I have to teach you how to do it. Okay, example 5 and then we're done. Okay? That's a determinant, and the determinant is equal to 3. So just evaluate the determinant. So go 4 times 3 is 12, minus x times x is x squared is equal to 3. Pull your 12 over. Negative x squared equals negative 9. Change your signs. X squared equals 9. Square root. X equals plus or minus 3. Done. What time does the bell ring? Quarter after? 18. I think I can finish those problems on your corrections. Don't we do it right now? Who says let's do it? Get them done. Who says I don't want to right now? I'm tired of math. Okay, we'll quit.